AMI, making about $20,000 a year. Could be one adult who gets disability payments or works part-time in hospitality. If you have 3 adults, it could be 1 or 2 adults get Social Security or disability, or 2 adults that work part-time in retail service, hospitality, or as home health aides. This is really important because when you look at the professions that fall in these categories, everybody knows somebody here. They're either people who take care of you, who take care of your family, who make sure that our jobs and our workspaces are clean. So we want to make sure that we're providing housing for these individuals and families. Next slide. So what the shift did to address the housing instability of these 95,000 households is put together a plan that looks not only at building and preserving affordable housing. Building and preserving affordable housing is one part of the solution. We also looked at incomes and wages. We know that housing supply itself can help, but if you have individuals or households or a limited ability to earn income, that will also keep you where you're at. Next slide. So cost burden. How can you address cost burden? Again, you can increase your incomes of the household with job training, benefits navigation, or housing vouchers, or you can decrease the housing costs by buying down rents or building and preserving affordable, lasting affordable options. When we talk about cost burden, individuals who are cost burdened are spending more than 30% of their income on their housing costs. Now, what this means is that things like healthcare, food, transportation, education sometimes will take a back seat so that families can pay more on their housing. We're trying to take this scale figuratively and weigh it more accurately to distribute that, to lower your housing costs so that households have more to spend on healthcare, food, transportation, education. Part of this solution is benefits navigation, making sure that individuals have access to programs that help them with their healthcare costs, that help them with their food costs, that help them with their transportation costs, and help them with their education costs, because that can have the same effect as lowering housing costs. And we know those programs exist in our community. Next slide. So in order to address this through these different interventions, we had to work with our partners to identify how we're going to track and monitor these. When we talk about increasing household wages or subsidizing incomes, we're working with the San Antonio Housing Authority, talking with our own departments, City of San Antonio Workforce Development Office, and our Department of Human Services. With public assistance and housing choice vouchers, you're able to offset cost burden households so that they can find units that may be available on the open market. With benefits navigation, we've seen this during the pandemic, as the city has invested a lot in connecting households with resources that are out there. There's a lot of federal programs that existed before the pandemic and new programs that were created as a result of the pandemic, and ensuring that these residents have connections to them, like the child tax credit, for example, is something that can really help a household navigate COVID, but also going forward. And then job training. The City of San Antonio has put a very large investment in, we say, ready to work. We do know that if a household or an individual is able to have access to job training and increase their earning potential, it can offset household costs as well. We talk about producing and preserving more income restricted units. This is where our department has traditionally operated in production and preservation of affordable units, using gap financing and other tools to build more affordable housing. Things like owner-occupied repair and repair programs, along with rental repair. We also want to leverage the private sector. We do know that the private sector plays an important role in providing naturally occurring affordable housing. We do know if there's a shortage of housing overall, that will create a greater demand on the housing that's affordable to other people. So the ways that we want to look to advance private development from being able to provide affordable housing, naturally occurring affordable housing, is looking at our unified development code to see where we can make changes to ensure that the housing that is being produced is still of a high standard, but with lower overall cost. And those savings can be passed on to renters or homeowners, depending on what the final product is. We're also looking at some innovative solutions, free market solutions that have been used around the country. We want to try to expand the use of accessory dwelling units. There are back houses, granny flats. These have twofold purpose in our community. They can provide individuals who may be aging in place, a place to stay on site. It can provide a source of passive income to maybe income earners who have fixed income. And it also provides affordable housing options for individuals that may be looking for. Then home sharing. We do know that there's a shortage of affordable housing units, apartments, and homes. But we do have many underutilized rooms within these apartments. Cities have been able to utilize home sharing programs to provide affordable units for individuals, provide a source of income for individuals who may have maybe empty nesters or have vacant rooms. So based off this approach, we were able to split up addressing those 95,000 households through a variety of interventions that I just spoke about. For affordable housing, we determined that our new affordable housing target would be 28,094 units, which equates to about 2,800 units a year. Talk a little bit more about these goals, but this approach overall seeks to address two of the root causes of our housing crisis that were identified in the housing policy framework. Mainly that San Antonio's housing supply is not keeping pace with economic growth, and that housing costs are outpacing the incomes in San Antonio. So together, these four interventions, many of which the city has already invested in, and seek to address the housing instability of the city. Slide. So these are a breakdown of the new targets that we are proposing over the next 10 years. One thing you'll notice when you look at this is that the vast majority of the target goals are at 50% or below the area median income. Now, this ties back to the analysis that we did to identify the need in the community. You'll also see that under production at 0 to 30% AMI, there's an asterisk there. And if you read the bottom, this ties down to one of the strategies that we're coordinating with the Department of Human Services. They came out of their homelessness strategic plan, which is to create 1,000 units of permanent supportive housing. Now, this type of housing, if you look at 0 to 30% just specifically, are individuals who are on the lower end, individuals that may be transitioning out of homelessness, maybe in and out of homelessness, and they need some stability to be able to get access to the services that hopefully more stable housing options. We've also included 60 to 80% target for homeownership production. It's a very difficult AMI range to produce affordable housing, but we do have some strategies in the SHIP that are going to help us, mainly community land trust, land banking, and for possible down payment assistance. Next slide. So this is another look at the 28,000 units broken down by AMI. Just a visual representation of where that need falls. Again, 75% of those goals are at 50% of the area median. This also shows the distribution between production and preservation. The need identified in the community is say that the preservation of affordable housing is one of the key areas. So our goals reflect the majority of our target goals in preservation versus production. Next slide. So how will we pay for this? That was one of the main questions. That was the second question after we set our housing targets. And we work with economic and planning systems, same people who are the consultant who helped us with our housing targets. And what we did is we did an analysis. We did an analysis based off of our existing affordable housing plan. We didn't use, average subsidy, based on best practices around the country. Although we took that into consideration, we looked at our actual pipeline, what's being built in San Antonio, and how it's being done. So we looked at the average subsidy per unit by AMI level of the program. We looked at the funding required by the source and by the program. There, we were able to see exactly how much money the city and its partners are putting into the developments that are taking place on the ground. What are the AMI levels that they're achieving? After the analysis, we found that our 28,000 target represents approximately $3.3 billion in housing investment over the next 10 years. This is a variety of funding sources. And the key takeaway here is that $1 billion in our locally directed funding sources would leverage $2.3 billion over the next 10 years. Talk a little bit about that. So when we talk about leverage funding sources, the city of San Antonio and its partners typically leverage federal funding sources. These include low-income housing tax credits, HUD financing, conventional debt, private activity bonds. Make up the majority of the funding sources. Layered in there are a lot of other tools. Of course, we include our housing bond, which is still under development, $150 million. Another one at $150 million in 2027. We have our affordable housing budget. This budget is what we as a department use annually. This includes our general fund revenue from City Council. This includes our federal funds, home and CDBG that we receive. This also includes our affordable housing dollars and any recapitalized funds that we get back from projects that we've done. We've included our home American Rescue Plan dollars. This is funding, recovery funding that was given to the city of San Antonio. Total of it was $28 million. However, we do have admin costs, so that'll be $18 million, and that's specifically directed for affordable housing. We have our tax increment reinvestment zones. This is a tool that the city uses to reimburse development for public infrastructure. We have our partnership with the San Antonio Housing Trust. They accrue money annually based on developments that they've done. They have some revenue for that, and they issue an RFP for projects. So we're working with them very closely on that. Tax exemptions, the San Antonio Housing Trust, as well as the Bexar County Housing Trust, are able to issue tax exemptions for projects that include affordable housing. And then we worked with the San Antonio Housing Authority to look at the capital funds that they receive annually. These aren't funds that we're redirecting. These are funds that they already use to rehab their existing developments. We want to make sure that we're counting those because the residents who live in that housing are residents who are identified in our needs. Next slide. Lastly, what we did with the Strategic Housing Implementation Plan is work on the strategies. When we picked up the housing policy framework, there's a lot of really good work. Some of it is lacking in the same level of detail as other things. So there was a lot of question marks from staff. And then there's a lot of other great documents that were created between the time the housing policy framework was adopted and now. And certainly things have changed with the pandemic. So there was a lot of strategies that were brought to us by stakeholders that said, if you're doing a strategic housing implementation plan, you need to make sure to read X, Y, and Z. So that's what we did. Next slide. So we worked with those 80 stakeholders. The full implementation strategies were provided in documents. Housing policy framework, I'm sure many of you have seen these opportunity at risk, for everyone home anti-displacement initiative. We've worked very closely with VIA, our homelessness strategic plan. So we tried to pull everything that was relevant to housing into one document. So we as a city can be coordinated as we move forward. Next slide. Again, we characterized and categorized each one of these strategies under the five main focus areas in the housing policy framework. Develop a coordinated housing system, increase city investment in housing, increase affordable housing production, rehabilitation, and preservation, protect and promote neighborhoods, and ensure accountability to the public. So in our document that you have online, we also have a summary here with you today, but I'll talk a little bit about where you can download the full document. You'll be able to go in each one of these strategies. Each strategy has a couple of things to do. You've got a summary of what the strategy is meant to do. It will have little icons on it to tell you the estimated duration of developing this policy, the estimated cost of developing this policy. It'll have lead implementation partners. Not all of them are city policies. Some of them will be led by partner agencies. So each one will have that level of detail. One thing I'll also say about these implementation strategies is each one will go through public engagement process. The SHIP itself is not it is a roadmap. It is a plan of how we get from here to there. So when you pick up a policy, and I'll just pick up develop a one-stop shop housing, we will have to go through a process of, identifying stakeholders, identifying a public input process. There will be an approval process for that. We get funding for that. So that could be a year-long process in and of itself. But what this strategic housing implementation process is, who is going to lead that? Who needs to be at the table? What should it accomplish at a minimum? And when in our timeline over the next 10 years. So that's what the strategic housing implementation plan, the strategies component really. So when we talk about a one-stop shop housing center, I think what we've gone through during the pandemic has really helped us identify the need for a center like this. I think the idea of the one-stop shop has actually come from the city. We have a one-stop development services center where if you are pulling a permit or building something, you can go in here and you can get assistance from utilities and from multiple city departments. Residents have said they would like the same, but for services relative to them, to a resident of the home. They don't want to get redirected to different departments all the time. So that's the intention of this. We want to make sure that it's comprehensive, accessible, and user-friendly. Could be, there's scattered sites, could be single site, could be leveraging online tools. I think we have to go through that process to see. But what this implementation plan does is it gives us a starting point for what we can do. Next slide. Next slide again. I'm just going to touch on one of these in every section, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. We've got the summary document. One of the other things that came out of this process is supporting and growing our nonprofit housing providers. When we set new goals, when we add new funding, we have to understand that the city itself doesn't build the funding. We rely on our partners to go out there and help us build it. Nonprofits are critical in ensuring that not only do we have the units on the ground, but that the supportive services are wrapped in. So how can we grow and support the ones that are here or the ones that we may need? And that means a couple of things. Maybe access to funding. It may be stability in funding, and it may be process improvements. When we talk about increasing affordable housing production and preservation, something that came up with speaking with the Office of Sustainability and through the plans that they've done over the past years is advancing. I'm sorry. This is ADA and visibility standards. Highlighted in a different presentation. But this is to ensure that new and preserved affordable housing is accessible to older adults. So this was a need that we've identified over the years. We do know that as populations age, accessibility is a key component. So how do we design houses and apartments to be accessible? How do we make them visitable? So whether it's ramps, wide doorways, low lights, when the city is giving funding, are we building housing so that individuals can age in place and older individuals are able to visit? Slide. Next slide. So protecting and promoting neighborhoods. One of the key strategies out of there was to establish a demolition prevention and mitigation program. So we heard this a lot through our 401 placement initiative. And that's basically ties back also to our OHB opportunity at risk report that said that the most affordable housing in the city is the housing stock that already exists. Our older housing stock is currently the most affordable, but it also is in great need of money. So programs like owner-occupied rehab under one roof are critically important, but we do have properties that go through the demolition process for a variety of reasons. So this strategy looks at when that happens, how can we ensure that not only is that house preserved, but it's also reused for affordable housing? Because when it's lost, it's lost. It's going to be rebuilt. Right? And ensuring accountability to the public. So actualizing the city-adopted public participatory principles. So we've heard this throughout the SHIP process. I like to think as the city, we do our best to be able to get public input, to move forward policies with feedback from the community that reflects the needs of the community. But we have heard that the city needs to do a better job of this. So this strategy is critically focused on making sure that when we pick up the SHIP and we say we're going to develop a one-stop shop housing centers, that we're bringing the people who are most, who have lived experiences, the people that the one-stop shop housing center is seeking to serve, to the conversation that they can provide input. We talk about the eviction process, or the people who have lived experiences with evictions. So this is very key to that. We have adopted public participatory principles already that were adopted by City Council. So we want to make sure that we actualize them when we move forward with these strategies. Next slide. I want to talk a little bit about partners. I think I talked a little bit about at the beginning that this is not just the city of San Antonio. We're trying to partner with our agencies to make sure that we're coordinated and addressing. So when we're looking at the San Antonio Housing Trust, SAHA, and Merritt County, each one has a different focus. Each one has different tools. Certainly, they may be targeting different sectors of the population. However, in order for us to be a coordinated housing system, we need to work together. We need to know what each other is doing. We need to make sure that if there are holes identified, that we can work strategically to try to address them. Two of the main overlapping things through conversations with our partners that we identified are that our tracking and accountability needs to be very good. Talk a little bit about the accountability in a couple of slides, but the ability to be able to understand exactly what's happening, the pipeline of developments, the clients that are served, and the funding that's being used. The other is a shared legislative agenda. Oftentimes, we may be each individually advocating for legislation that helps us. But what this exercise has taught us is that as agencies together, anything that helps the residents of San Antonio, be it through tools that the Bear County House, that the San Antonio Housing Authority has, or San Antonio Housing Trust has, we're all residents in the same community. So making sure we have a shared legislative agenda. San Antonio Housing Trust is primed to be able to help on certain things, like community land trusts, land banking programs, but we also know that they're working to fund development and preservation, especially with need affordability. For the San Antonio Housing Authority, we want to work with them to see how we can help them administer more housing vouchers, whether it's improving the voucher process for landlords, making it easier for residents, or increasing the number of vouchers within the community. Not all on some. There's some legislative items that need to be addressed, but we as a community can help with that. We're going to make sure that they've got resources to rehabilitate their existing public housing. And then when they do construct new housing, that includes deep affordability. We want to work with Bexar County on building affordable housing development preservation. We want to work with them on permanent supported housing. And we want to look at where we have some policy overlap, or where the county may be able to take the lead on some policy issues, that they're able to do that in coordination with us. So for the public input and next steps, obviously this is our first public meeting, but there are other ways that you can get involved. I'll talk a bit about those. So today our public comment and our document is online. That is live. 1st of November. We're here at our first public meeting. On Wednesday, we have a B session with the City Council. And then on the 4th, we will have our second public meeting at St. Philip's College. Next week, we will have a third public meeting, and that will have sign language available itself at the Eagle Library. And then we will close our public comment on the 15th, although that may be adjusted out another week. So we'll make sure we've got your information here, and we'll update you on this timeline as it changes. And then we plan to go to City Council December 2nd for adoption. I will say that all of these public meetings will be available in person and virtual and in Spanish. The documents that are posted online, you'll have a long version, you'll have a short version, those will be in Spanish. You should have those up, if not by tomorrow, later this week. Right. So here's just a summary of, or a map, should I say, of the public meetings that will be held. St. Philip's College and the library. Right. And again, you'll have the link here. You'll be able to go there. Anything new that changes with the ship will be sure to post any new information. You'll be able to comment on the comment collector, or you can email us directly at housingpolicy@sanantonio.gov. If you are interested in being part of developing a particular strategy, say one-stop shop housing center, sounds awesome. I'd love to be a part of that. You can identify that. We will use that list to reach out to you as soon as that process starts. And our progress. So we will be tracking the progress of the SHIP, and I think it's actually one of the key pieces of the SHIP. We'll have an annual report that comes out by the Housing Commission. We'll have a dashboard that will be publicly viewable here pretty soon. We will present monthly to the Housing Commission and quarterly to the City's Planning Community Development Subcommittee. And what this does is it not only helps you as the community be informed of what we're doing, but it also helps us make adjustments where we need. If we are overperforming in certain areas, underperforming in others, there's issues that we've identified, we'll be able to use this data to make adjustments. On the forms online, we're here today. Please feel free. You'll be able to tell us a couple of things. If there's a strategy missing from the SHIP, if so, what it is, and what strategies would you be interested in helping? Right. So with that said, I'm here to help answer any questions. I'm joined by our Chief Housing Officer, some of our partner agencies, and the rest of the HSC staff. So how do we want to do this? Okay, so
thank you. That was a very good presentation. What's with this shortened period? Is 14 days typical?
Yes, that's a very good question. So, as I said at the beginning of the conversation, we started this process over a year ago. We've had multiple public meetings on this in bits and pieces. So, for example, the recalibration. I think we had 2 or 3 meetings at Housing Commission on that particular piece for a new housing goal. We've had 2 meetings at Housing Commission had several meetings at the Planning and Community Development Committee meeting. So we felt that this public engagement period is adequate if you factor in all the other public engagement we've done up to this point. Having said that, we do realize that the document is rather large, and if you wanted to read through it and provide substantive comments, you might need more time. So we're looking at extending that another week to the 22nd.
Your follow-up question? We're open. Just like we want to make sure that neighborhood risk.
Yeah, thank you for that. So I'm gonna try and remember every point you made, so I can try to address some of it, at least right now. Land banking, yes, an important tool. So that's something that's highlighted in the plan. It is also something that we'll be working with the bond committee on as we develop the state housing bond, which will be approved, which is a big component of our funding plan and one of the, limited flexible funding sources that we will have to be able to do that. We've identified the same need as you. Housing land prices are skyrocketing, and so our ability to be able to buy some of that land, to preserve it and utilize it for affordable housing down the road when the prices have escalated is critical. So that is something that we're looking at. Tax freezes and tax burdens, that is something that we will be working on too. It's also in the implementation plan. We supported Representative Bernal's previous bill, which looked at legacy homeowners or residents who had been in their home for a very long period of time. And a certain income criteria where we could offer them some tax relief, tax freezes. That didn't happen, but we are looking at all kinds of tax tools to be able to leverage. Some of that may be lobbying, less tools that we have. Things like neighborhood preservation districts, are somewhat limited in their ability, but those are things that we are. That is unfortunately the byproduct of investment is raising property taxes. To that end, we are looking at something that was included in the housing policy framework, which is a displacement impact assessment. So as the city invests in projects, they may have unintended consequences of displacement. What are we doing to mitigate those costs? So that's one of the first strategies that we want to be able to undertake, analyze, and make recommendations for in time for the next plot cycle. Nonprofit housing providers, absolutely. I would stress that yes, in order for us to be able to accomplish these goals, it's not just a matter of funding, although that is a big piece of it. You do need capacity to be able to build, and affordable housing is on its own. It's competing with all of the other industries for qualified and skilled labor. So how are we building up the capacity within our community to be able to handle affordable housing specific projects? Okay.
So many people to city today have complicated so I think is a central part of the housing issue. Which see tax incentives to allow for construction turn down. So high. So the question is, should you all sit together this project? Who sets the boundary for the geographic tied into the survey this is there closer to the office. Really, so basically we're dealing with too much. Seems like so I can stop and phased into just seems like that citizen still get stolen.
No, thank you for that. Great questions. Yes, so we really started with the AMI. We looked at recalibrating our goals in terms of what the need is in San Antonio. I will say that the Housing Commission recognized the disparity between the HUD AMIs and those standards as HUD. So that would be a question for why they include that region, geographic region. We do have connections with our local HUD office, so I can be sure to inquire about that. But what we did is we adjusted that, as I mentioned, down from 80% of the AMI, which is pretty traditionally where affordable housing programs go up to, down to 60% of the area median income. Now, this is part of the story. The other part is, can you go forward to our housing goals? No, forward is what we are going to track as success for this plan. And that would be these targets. And the majority of the targets are below 50, but there is a great number at 30% below AMI. So this is what we're going to be tracking and measuring against. And this is what tells us as a department and us as a city, along with our partners, whether or not we're being successful. So I hear you. I completely understand. I think that that is a valid concern. And we recognize that. It came up in our analysis and it shows up in our housing targets. There we go. That's what I wanted to see. So this is reflective of the analysis in terms of what it showed the residents of San Antonio needed. So that's a reflection of what our target goals are. So that this is not to say that we wouldn't produce 60 and 80% units. I think, you know, I don't want to get overly complicated, but one of the reasons that we've been able to exceed our goals so much from the housing policy framework is because we've been able to do something called income averaging, where projects that typically provide only 60% AMI units, which the Light Tech program did for a long time, can now average out in total 60%. So as a result, they're able to put 30, 40, 50% units in a development. And on the other end, they put some 80 or 70% units. And that really helps because we've had such a long line of 60% projects that came through to San Antonio because that's what the tool developed, right? And so now we've been able to leverage that. So now our next step is saying, okay, we've been able to income average. How can we bring those offsetting units that are at the higher end lines also in? And then how can we bring some of those 40s and 50s down to 30s? So that's something that we're going to be working through, especially with our housing bond, because those are some flexible dollars to be able to do that going forward. But our goal through the SHIP is to address this, to provide this many units. And, you know, one thing I'll say really quickly, I know we probably have more questions, is, you know, we're assuming a lot of the funding and units and targets based off of what we know right now. There are some federal bills that could potentially change some of this, a lot more funding for housing vouchers, a lot more funding for public housing authorities, a lot more funding in the National Housing Trust, which could provide a lot more funding for 30 to 50% units. We don't know what will happen, but we can track this and we can make adjustments. So I hope that helps to answer your question, but I'd be happy to speak with you more.
You touched on. And my question actually, is there a formula? Is there a formula? Can you tell us more about how that formula works? And they're giving the developer something. How much are they on? And I feel like, I know you're, you know, but I feel like I'd like to know, getting this percentage for your whole government, 30% is public money. I feel it's fair to say 30% of the units are this percentage AMI. And if you get it, you know, it can be actually, well, I think for everybody, but a little bit more transparent. And I have always felt with residents. And they get to decide. They should get to decide. When they get the public money, it should come straight to the town. I'm really about that. And the other part is, it should also come from the I mean, it should be very clear. And I think whoever comes to develop, they're walking into, and they shouldn't have as much wiggle. I think the whole community would get behind that. Got my money? I tell you how to spend it. I think I'm not comfortable. You know, money is money. Money. And the rest. They don't, in exchange, don't have to stay. There's this certain amount that needs to be.
Yeah, those are great points. And, you know, I don't want to dwell too much on the history of San Antonio because I think that has been the perception that some of the affordable housing developments that, I'm sorry, I forgot your name, this gentleman's point, you know, maybe haven't provided true levels of affordability. And so, going forward with the shift, we're making sure that we do, and we will write policies and programs and award funding based on being able to achieve these goals. I will say that the complicated part is that our funding, our flexible funding, is typically one of many funding sources that go into the project. So if you take a project that receives low-income housing tax credits, for example, that can be providing 30 to 70% of the project's equity. That's a lot, right? Those rules aren't written by us. They're written by THCA, who's the state agency. And so when you look at, what we're contributing versus to what the state may be contributing, we can be a very small piece. So our ability to be able to negotiate is not as great, right? They'll really want those tax credits, and they can't get money from us, then maybe they make it work, maybe they don't. I don't know. But they do have to follow those rules from the primary. Having said that, I think that's the direction that we're going as a community. Having conversations with the San Antonio Housing Trust, with SAHA, our main focus is addressing these households. So could a development be built with low-income housing tax credits and no city money that maybe doesn't meet this possibility? Possibly. But if they're going to be getting our funding, city funding, layered into that, then this is what we expect them to achieve, is helping these residents. Rent control into the future, I think that's a little bit iffy. Rent control in Texas is not allowed, but I think your point is, how can you ensure lasting affordability? I think that is your point. And so that's twofold, right? Making sure that we're providing units of AMI that San Antonio needs. And then also something the shift touches on a little bit, talk about job training. I mean, are housing prices keeping up with incomes to San Antonio? I think that's also critical, right? Because the formula that rents are tied to increase with the average median income. So year over year, census data comes out, how does their formula and their calculation, our median income could raise 5%. So then the allowed rent increases 5%. But if the city of San Antonio workforce average income isn't raising by that much, then you start to get the runaway rental and housing costs versus what people are earning. And I think that is, it's not a simple issue. It's jobs, it's, taxing, it's got a couple of things. But I think to answer your point, that's where we're headed. That's what this plan seeks to address, is to provide housing for these residents, not to provide housing how it's been provided.
Hi, Becky Sanchez, Westside Resident Association. So I have a comment and question, and the comment is about the public engagement portion, which I'm very disappointed and upset about, because our members do participate when they have the opportunity. Throughout this past year, we've been attending meetings and such, but a majority of our members are not online, they're on the internet. Today you mentioned that you can go online to read the report, and you can go online to make comments. So today's the first public engagement. It would have been nice to make comments about the report, but it was available today, right? Maybe over the weekend. So today is also the other one, and this neighborhood participates in that. So not too many people here, but we're not engaging with the community. So sorry that I have to lecture all of them. I need to speak out for my. The other thing I was going to talk about is AMI. When we're talking about using the San Antonio bond funds to help with goals, why are you going to be behind the AMI for that? Because the bond money is for San Antonio residents. So I hope that you are going to allow the city and use San Antonio.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. Speaking, and I do want to apologize, and say a little sprinkles, and it's probably was not the best day to do it. That was an oversight on our part. So we'll ensure that future meetings that doesn't happen again. We are looking to expand the public input process another week, so hopefully that will get more time, and maybe we can come back to this, to the west side to see if we can do another meeting. So I hear that. With regard to the AMI and the bond. So the bond, I'll be actually giving a very similar presentation on Wednesday that will cover this. The bond is using the SHIP as its framework for how it proceeds forward. It's included as our funding strategy. Like I said, it's one of the key funding sources that allows us to have some flexibility in how we spend it. So we will absolutely be making sure that the bond ties into this. That has to go through a process, so I can't, predict where it will end. But staff's recommendation is that the bond will be used to address these households. And when we talk about HUD versus City of San Antonio, the HUD allowable limits of 80% AMI are based on a region bigger than San Antonio. But it is just a measuring stick. So I think what we've done through these goals is chosen a different point on that measuring stick of where San Antonio lies. And so that 60% AMI would be the upper echelons of what we consider affordable. But you will see through the housing bond that we will be prioritizing more than likely even lower AMI levels than that. So yes, your answer is yes, we'll be using the bond funds to address the City of San Antonio states, not anywhere else.
So there's a couple of comments and questions. First comment is from Joey Cipriano. First comment is remove barriers to housing production and preservation can be devastating to neighborhoods who do not want developers building apartment buildings in their neighborhood. How does improving rehabbing multifamily housing address the issue with slumlords and poor management? There are the core issues which cause blight in communities have then to deal with these properties after they've been.
Okay, all right, so two things in there. Removing barriers to affordable housing. So we have heard that. One of our strategies is to undergo a principal infill development process. We've heard that from the community. Infill is definitely something that we would like to encourage. We know that vacant lots sitting by themselves can be, not beneficial to a neighborhood. The question is, how do we redevelop them in a way that fits the character of the neighborhood? And for our purposes, how does it provide affordable housing? So when we look at removing barriers to affordable housing, we're looking at UDC amendments that would say, and it doesn't have to be multifamily. I mean, the infill could be a single family home, but if you wanted to build a single family home, just say, we actually get this quite a few times a month. I would love to build a home on a vacant lot, but I went to the city, it's going to cost me this much money, so I'm not going to do anything about it. Or if you have any money that can help me. If we can figure out ways to allow for development that maybe isn't subsidized, but is affordable to individuals, that provides another funding source, another housing source within the city. So those are some of the things that we're looking at through those UDC amendment processes and removing barriers. The other question, remind me again, what was the other question? Slumlords, yes. Okay, so I agree. We definitely do not want to promote slumlords, but what we do know is that there are a lot of developments out there that are home to residents that are providing affordable rents. Some of them get converted either to market rate, which we lose affordable housing stock, and all those residents may get displaced. And then some of them deteriorate to the point where residents have to leave. So I don't look at it as an either or. In cases where we can help residents relocate if there's a bad landlord, we can do that. But in cases where we can provide tools and resources to the landlord to be able to rehabilitate their unit in exchange for lasting affordability, coming in for a certain period of time, then we want to be able to do that. That'll be one of the more complicated strategies I think we'll have to undergo. That'll go through a community process by which, how do we identify these smaller landlords? We have heard of many small landlords say, hey, I'm not making a whole lot of money here. I'm providing affordable housing for these residents, but I don't have any money to be able to put a roof on it. And this person just offered me twice what it's worth. So there will be 4 people who won't have anywhere to go, and then we lose a unit that could potentially be rented to a resident. resident. So in those scenarios, it's kind of where we look to operate, something similar to a rehab program, replacing a roof, weatherization. What can we do to provide an incentive, keep that unit affordable and safe, and then also, make sure that it doesn't deteriorate.
Second question is, again, from Joey. What strategies are being offered by Infill to assist people in becoming first-time home buyers who are able to move out of a home?
Yes, so that is also one of the key pieces in the housing policy framework is that homeownership rates of client. You know that homeownership provides a lot of benefits, mainly that you're able to build wealth over time. But we do know that fewer and fewer people are being able to transition to homeownership. So what can we do? Well, aside from building more affordable housing units, single-family affordable housing units, which we want to do, rehabbing existing affordable housing units so that their children, or if it does have to, change hands, is available for those residents. We're not losing that stock. And we also have a down payment assistance program. And actually, we are in the process of raising those limits in response to the market conditions that we see here in the city and across the country with rising housing costs. But what this does essentially is if you are a qualified home buyer, so maybe you're in a spot where you haven't been able to save a lot of money to compete with individuals on the open market, we provide a funding down payment assistance for you to be able to enter into homeownership. So that's something we'll continue to do, and we'll be able to partner with our nonprofit housing providers to see if when they build a home, can we also supply down payment assistance for possible residents. So that's what we're looking at doing. There's definitely there are some things that we will look to address via legislation with taxes to see where we can help. But we do have down payment assistance. I think most directly allows somebody who may otherwise not be able to enter homeownership have the possibility of doing that.
And it's the form is here. If you filled out and we bring them back to your office. They will work on it. Yeah. We have those forms in English and Spanish.
Well, really quickly before everybody leaves, thank you all for coming out here. I really appreciate it. It's been great to be out here and share all the amazing work that we've done over the past year. Please, we've got thick skin, so don't feel bad. If you want to criticize me with a plan, I would like to hear how we can make it better. So thank you all for coming out, and please be safe getting home.
Okay.
Yes. There is, yes. We have a couple of them, depending on the need that you may have. So we do under one roof program, which replaces a worn roof. You've got it. We have a minor repair program, so it does some smaller repairs. I believe the threshold for that is up to $30,000 for repairs. And then we've got an owner occupied, which is pretty substantial. It could be a whole home renovation, or in some cases, it can be saved reconstruction. Yes, and it depends on the program. Usually annually is when we open up those. But there are some programs that are kind of on a rolling basis, so you'll be able to apply that. Well, I definitely agree that the need is there. I will tell you that we definitely get more applications than we have slots available for our programs. But that doesn't go against your point that the need is great in the community. So we're looking to continue the investment in there. I'm sure we'll have a very good discussion at our bond committee on how those bond dollars can be used to add additional funding to those programs. So completely agree. And all right. See you on Wednesday. Oh, we actually have our production administrator. So she called us.
Hi, my name's Annie. I'm the housing production administration. I oversee all the rehab programs. And you do bring up a good point. We're cognizant of, not taking for granted that people have online access to get the word out. So we did expand our plan with our application that opened October. But we did utilize VCAT data this year from the appraisal district. They know conditions of homes, so we did mail some mailers out to those in poor condition. Through our department's work, we have identified more than 350 neighborhood associations to try to go through there. We use our council offices and our key partners such as Merced to get the word out. So, but there's always room for improvement. So we will welcome any ideas, but making sure that we're not just focusing on one medium to get that message out. But thank you for the recommendation.
Richard Boswell, President of UTSA, my city home, and I'll plug you guys for all these on the phone stuff later. But the one, just to focus on this slide right here, is why we putting any focus on 100% AMI and above. If you make 60, I'm also a licensed general contractor and a real estate agent. And if you make $66,000, I got 1,000 different homes that are on the market right now. I don't know why anybody that makes $66,000 a year or $80,000 a year would need the city of San Antonio's support to build more homes where there's 1,000 homes right now for you.
Thank you for that, Rich. Pleasure working with you over the past several years. What I would say is that what we found through our analysis is there was a need of homes at that level, and it couldn't have to do with the larger market, and less so with the homes that are available. You have a shortage of housing supply. That means the individual that may be buying this home is getting outbid, so then they're going to go down here and they're going to outbid that person, and that person's going to outbid that person, and then pretty soon you have people that can't find a home. So many people you may have too have said, I can't afford to live in San Antonio, I'm going to go somewhere else. Or I'm going to just continue to live where I am until the market crashes. You hear stuff like that, right? They just can't find anywhere to live. So our analysis told us that. We've worked with our nonprofit housing providers, and we've received the same feedback. The Housing Commission went through a pretty extensive process on defining affordability, and there was consensus from them that 120% AMI is needed within the community. Now, I will say that's not a focus of our targets necessarily, but it is something that was identified.
And can I add?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Super fast. So for rental units, 60% and below is the focus. That above 60% is for home ownership. That's where the distinction.
Well, it's like 66,000, you can buy a $250,000 house. How did you buy it?
I think, and the other thing, I'm sorry to cut you off. I think, and we can talk about this more, I'd be happy to. I think if you use a scenario in which somebody has a reasonable amount of debt, isn't able to get, the interest rate in which they think they're able to, all of that, and then they're not just their debt, but the other expenses they have. On paper, maybe it looks like they can afford up to that, but when you go to a mortgage financer, you're probably not going to get issued a loan for that. That's just my gut feeling, but, I'd be happy to.
220,000 or something. There are houses. So, that are at 30% and homeless, the other people.
No, and I completely understand. And, I do want to emphasize that, while we do have targets for those individuals, and we do know that homeownership is something that we want to focus on. We are looking to try and provide homeownership opportunities at lower AMI levels where we can. And then to your point about individuals that may end up homeless, really putting a large emphasis on those 30% or below AMI categories, rehabilitation of homeownership units at 30% below, so we can keep those units affordable for individuals that may be and then permanent supportive housing, which I think is, something new for the city. We don't have a site-based permanent supportive housing development yet. Is working to build 1,000 units over the next 10 years. So I just wanted to add that.
And then I have a question about your is NHSP going to make a separate budget that right now and they can't wait for the underground.
Yes, it would be, although we may look to try and leverage some of those funds if possible. But, right now, council did approve $1 million for a pilot program, demolition diversion program. So we're working with DSD right now on how we roll that out. But yes, it would be a separate funding source. And, we'll have to work to identify funding sources for continual funding in the future. But yes, it would be a separate fund. Everybody is standing and staring at me, so please. You have to go. Again, thank you so much for coming out. I really appreciate it. And drive safe, everybody.